Welcome to the board-sponsored Ethnomusicology and Public Policy panel. We are thrilled to feature Dr. Dwandalyn Reece from, she's the Curator of Music and Performing Arts at the brand new, beautiful National Museum of African American History and Culture. My name is Sean Williams, and I'm a member of the board until this afternoon, and I am thrilled actually to have this group of people, and I'm delighted to welcome you. Dr. Reece held the positions of Senior Program Officer at the National Endowment for the Humanities, Assistant Director of the Louis Armstrong House and Archives, Chief Curator of the Brooklyn Historical Society, and Curator at the Motown Historical Museum in Detroit. And we will have two respondents from the Society for Ethnomusicology. I will introduce them as soon as Dr. Reece has completed her talk, which is titled Music Matters, right? And I think this is a really important week for us to be thinking about this and thinking about how music matters. Please welcome Dr. Dwandalyn Reece.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's good. That's good. I want to express my thanks to the SEM Board of Directors for inviting me to speak to you this morning. And on behalf of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, I also want to extend a belated welcome to Washington, D.C. There are a wealth of riches beyond the political infrastructure, and I hope that you've had an opportunity to explore the historical and cultural offerings of this unique city. Music matters and the public sphere. I'm going to read a little, riff a little about my career working in the public sector and how music has played a role in what I do. In outlining my talk, I broke things down into 6 categories. I wanted to talk a little bit about my own personal mission, then talk about the public sector and how I fell into that kind of work, then talk about music and its relationship to the Smithsonian and to the Museum of African American History and Culture, then talk about the exhibition that is in the museum called Musical Crossroads, explore some of the challenges and opportunities that have arisen and continue to develop in developing that exhibition and seeing it through as the public starts to really engage with this content, and then reflect on some of the issues that mean something to me that I hope that we continue to explore as we continue to do this work. My work at the Smithsonian is a culmination of a career focused on making the humanities accessible in everyday life through music. As a child, I first experienced music as a creative endeavor, but I also came to learn that the arts were essential to understanding who we are, where we've been, and how we interpret the world around us. Music, as you all know, is a universal form of human creativity, expression, and communication. It is multidimensional in its impact and influence, and continues to define how we experience our lives and learn from each other despite the invisible borders that divide us. Music was my path to self-discovery and connecting to the world around me. In college, I began to understand it as a process, a web of relationships that voiced our cultural values and beliefs, sustained communities, served as an impetus for social change, and communicated across cultures and nations. To me, it was also a powerful tool that could impact the public good. When I was working on my master's degree in American culture at the University of Michigan, I explored music from an interdisciplinary perspective. I enjoyed the work I was doing, but it was experiencing great frustration within the confines of the classroom. There were theories, ideas, and practices that in my mind needed to be shared with the general public and put to work. The academy had its purpose, but I felt its reach could extend further, reaching people outside its walls and engaging them in larger ideas, empowering them to learn more, and encouraging them to interact with the world in a positive way. Museums proved to be my calling and helped open the door to applying my knowledge and skills in the public sector. Now, we think about museums, the old traditional museums. We think about dusty, unused repositories of forgotten objects of glory. But that image is slowly becoming a thing of the past. Museums of the late 20th and early 21st century see themselves as vibrant centers of public interaction. They've evolved into spaces of learning, and they're self-described agents whose social capital support democratic values through increased access, community engagement, diverse voices, and socially inclusive exhibitions and programming. They are also sites of collaboration where cultural and social identities are carefully negotiated between the museum and its many publics. By reevaluating and reinterpreting the facilities, the programs, the collections, and as well as retooling their purposes and promoting their spaces, redefining who their audiences are, and renaming themselves as educators, today's museums strive to reflect and shape contemporary society and empower the audiences they serve. As the nature of museums have changed, their stature in the community, in the nation, and in the world still carries a certain cultural authority as it legitimizes the stories it chooses to tell. The Smithsonian Institution is comprised of 19 museums and research centers and is the largest cultural complex in the world. Its mission is to increase the diffusion of knowledge by preserving and interpreting our nation's heritage and sharing its resources. As the nation's museum, it confers symbolic privilege and authority to the collections it's charged to interpret and preserve. The National Museum of African American History and Culture opened to the public on September 24th. The fact that it was a project that was 100 years in the making is just a reflection of this country's tangled and complex understanding of its racial history. According to our director, Lonnie Bunch, the museum's task is very simple. Quote, to use history and culture as a way to make a better America, to give America an opportunity to close the chasm between its stated ideals and the reality of life, end quote. It is an attempt to say this history and this culture have profoundly shaped our notions of freedom, of citizenship, and of who we are as Americans. The museum strives to create a visitor experience that is multidimensional, inviting moments that challenge and inspire, bringing historical and contemporary stories that reflect a people's journey and a nation's story. Within the context of the museum's 12 exhibitions, music poses several opportunities and challenges in telling of this larger story. The first question, and I should say that I started the museum 7 years ago. The project had already been in the works for 5 years. They already knew that they wanted to do a music exhibition, and that was about it. So I started in September 2009, really listening and trying to understand the narratives that we wanted to tell and get a real keen sense of the exhibitions that we were going to explore. One of the things that came to mind as I listened to people and we talked about the importance of history was the question about where does music fit in as a reflection of the African American experience? And there is an ongoing tension. I believe in the efforts to get the historical story across, there was a need to really elevate the profile of history. And that goes to say that traditionally, music, sports are frequently associated with defining the African American experience. That's what people know, but people know less about its history. So while music was essential to that story, it also had to find a place where it wasn't overwhelming the historical narrative that we needed to tell. As an exhibit strategy, we not only had music as its own exhibition, but we also used it as a tool of intervention and illumination, and to use it for greater impact throughout our exhibitions. And just to say a few words about the exhibitions that we did have in the museum, they're divided. How many of you have been able to visit? Okay, that's good. And those of you hold fast. I know tickets are sold out through March, but keep trying. They're divided into 3 clusters: history, community, and culture. And the 12 exhibitions look at the history of slavery and freedom, the era of segregation, a period that brings us from 1968 to the present. We also explore the role of community in exhibitions that look at the power of place and recognizing that there's no one African-American experience that is defined across the nation in different ways. We look at sports. We look at the military. We bring up the mantra of making a way out of no way and how African Americans did that in creating communities and making opportunities for themselves. And finally, culture, which in my mind is embedded in that sense of history that really is a tool of expression, social change, cultural tradition, and sustenance, and really the foundation of what American culture is all about. So in the place of all of this is musical Crossroads. I'm the curator, and as the curator, like an author of the book, I was the voice and vision behind that exhibition. In thinking about the exhibition and the curatorial voice, in my mind, I figured that it had to really embrace the sonic and experiential aspects and the varied ways that music is explored and experienced in time and space. However, that interpretation had to go beyond musicality, sound, or music itself, and see music as a process that has real-life applications on and off the stage within communities, neighborhoods, cities, and regions, all framed in historical and cultural context. To get the point of creating an exhibition, I want to make it clear that numerous decisions, a lot of hard decisions have to be made. And even though I was the curator of the exhibition and charged with bringing it to fruition, all the decisions that were made were not my own. All these decisions were populated with intentions and different voices, and these intentions represented different ideologies that we all lay claim to. So the voices of the director, the institution, the designer, the conservators, consultants, institutional values, colleagues, existing narratives, visitors, donors, lenders, public memories, and my own personal experiences all weighed in to create a polyphonic texture of individual utterances that play off one another in a collective whole.